All right, happy Monday and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for October 14th, 2024. The second of 4 Mondays this month, and if you're driving to work, call your boss, tell him or her you're going to be late. We have a ton of stuff to get to. And for many people, it's a 3-day weekend, today being Columbus Day, created to celebrate the discovery of the Americas by Italian explorer Christopher Columbus on October 12th, 1942. Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared Columbus Day as a holiday in 1934, and in 1937 it became a federal holiday celebrated annually on the second Monday of October, meaning federal offices, including the post office and banks, are closed today. Many schools are closed. The stock markets are open today. Some people will spend the day opposing Columbus Day as well. Former President Donald Trump likely to mention Columbus Day and those in opposition of it at his town hall tonight in Oaks, Pennsylvania. Vice President Harris campaigning today in Erie, Pennsylvania, and tomorrow marks 3 weeks until Election Day. Yesterday, the vice president was in Greenville, North Carolina. That is in the eastern part of the state, more than 300 miles from the areas hardest hit by the hurricane. She didn't mention anyone by name, but she called out those spreading misinformation in the aftermath of the hurricanes.
It's making it harder then to get people life-saving information if they're led to believe they cannot trust. And that's the pain of it all.
President Biden actually worked over the weekend assessing hurricane damage, meeting with local officials in the Tampa-St. Pete area of Florida yesterday.
We're prioritizing debris removal and working with the state and local partners to clear roads, to get wreckage into the 2 hurricanes off properties, and so more folks can return home and businesses can receive much-needed deliveries of food, fuel, medicine, and other essentials.
And former President Donald Trump was in Prescott, Arizona on Sunday.
The minute the polls open tomorrow, you'll be there and get everyone you know, because we want to take back our country. We're going to take back our country.
Before we get to Saturday's California rally and all the news surrounding that, the former president sat down for a one-on-one with our Chris Salcedo.
Mr. President, it's great to see you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time. Vast majority of the American people do not support illegal immigration, yet we can't get Congress to do anything about it. They refuse to put up an effective law that ends illegal immigration effectively into this country. You talked in Aurora about the implementation of the Foreign Enemies Act of 1798 to target the illegal aliens streaming into this country from 168 other nations. Why'd you go that route?
Well, it's been sitting there. People have talked about it. It's been tried. It's held up. It's very old. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. You know, it's been there for a long time, and people haven't used it. But we've never had a country that was abused like our country is being abused now. Nobody probably thought they had to use it. I didn't really want to use it when I cleaned up the border in 2016. I probably won the race based on the border. And I got it done, but that border was peanuts compared to this. This is a major, in history, there's never been a border so bad as this. And this is all self-inflicted. What they've done to our country is, and you covered very well, but what they've done to our country is not even believable. Allowing murderers and drug dealers and everybody to just, they don't even know who they are. All they know is they're murderers, drug dealers. They don't even know. They don't know where they are, who they are. They're all over the place. They came into our country totally unvetted, totally unchecked, and it turned out we had 13,099 murders. We had many drug dealers, many terrorists. We had a year, you saw this, Chris, where I was at 0 for terrorists coming in. Now, I don't even believe that, but this was done by the Border Patrol, and they had a number 0. The second year, they had 11. We'll take it, right? And let's assume it was a little more than that, but it wasn't much. Now we have thousands of terrorists coming in, thousands. They're all over the place. And they come in from rough places. So there's never been a time like this, Chris, never.
No, and you know what? You took me right where I wanted to go. Some of the byproducts of this lawlessness that we've been subjected to. DHS Inspector General's report revealed that 325,000 illegal alien children have been delivered into sex slavery, forced labor, other atrocities. And even after hearing that report, the U.S. Congress still approved more money to fund this Democrat agenda. What will you do to stop the sexual exploitation of children?
Well, we're going to stop a lot of things, but you don't really need a bill. All you have to do is say, close the border. This is why with Biden, who's the worst president in history, and she's the worst vice president. Now, here's the difference. She's not as good as him. He's actually better than her. This is what we are. This is where we are. This is not even possible. I think he's probably smarter than she is, for one thing. We cannot do this to our country. We've gone through 4 years of this with people that are incompetent, and we can't do this. But they were getting killed on this issue, the border. They want open borders. They forgot to stop when they did it about 3 months ago. They made it a little bit tougher to try and make the numbers. The only thing is they forgot to stop the airplanes that were flying over the border. Big Boeing, beautiful planes loaded up with migrants. They have no idea who they are. All they know is they were heading toward the middle of our country. And it's almost like a death wish, if you want to really think about it. I always like to know, where does the other side come from? Like in business, you want to know, what's their game, and you can figure things out. Nobody can understand who would be willing to do this. This is the worst thing. To me, this is worse than inflation, and inflation's bad. It's destroying people. But this is worse. This is destroying our country, the fabric of our country, what they've done. And it's a very tough thing. We're going to get it out. We're going to take care. We're going to have a big deportation. We're going to start with the killers and the drug dealers, the murderers. We have so many. But you really say, how did this happen? How could a thing like this have been allowed to happen? Who would want it? We call it the party of common sense. I do. I don't know if anyone else does, but I do. It's now the party of common sense. Common sense is you don't have an open border with everybody coming in. And it's also common sense for countries. I would have been worse than any of them. Venezuela, all of these countries, not all over the world. The Congo, a lot of people coming in from the Congo. What's going on in the Congo? Maybe you can tell me. But we have prisoners coming in from the Congo. They're in jails. Where do you come from? Jail. What did you do? We will not tell you. It ain't good, okay? But who would want this? They're destroying our country.
I can't even believe I have to ask this next question, because I could never imagine having to put disaster response and illegal immigration in the same question, but because...
And those people are not being taken care of. North Carolina is being so badly taken care of by Biden. It's horrible. And her.
And their Democrat government.
And she said she'd stick with the policies, okay? So you said 325,000 youth. What you didn't say is most of them are probably dead, never to be seen by their parents again. That, to me, is the greatest. That's an atrocity. Look at some of the worst things ever to happen in the world. 325,000 young people, probably mostly dead, or sex trade, or slavery.
Facilitated by the U.S. government.
By her. She was the border czar.
President Trump in a sit-down interview with Newsmax host Chris Salcedo. I cannot say for sure, but I would imagine that Chris will discuss the interview again on his show today, the Chris Salcedo Show, 4 o'clock Eastern. We may also learn more today about the 49-year-old guy that was arrested outside Trump's California rally on Saturday with guns in his car that had a fake license plate on it and multiple passports inside. This is the Riverside County, California sheriff.
I probably did have deputies that prevented the third assassination attempt. The license plate was what we in law enforcement would recognize as one that is homemade and indicative of a group of individuals that claim to be sovereign citizens. And assuming the deputy assumes that he was part of that identifying group.
He was charged with several crimes, but it is California, so he was released. Fake license plate, fake passports, multiple loaded weapons at the checkpoint for a former president, and released. And even though the sheriff said his deputies probably stopped the third assassination attempt, you probably won't hear much about this anywhere other than Newsmax. So at the Make America Great Again rally in Coachella, California, actor Dennis Quaid stumped for Trump.
I'm here today to tell you that it's time to pick a side. Are we going to be a nation that stands for the Constitution or for TikTok? Are we going to be a nation of law and order or wide open borders? Which is it? Because it's time to pick a side. I'm an actor, and I just had this movie come out. It was famous last name Reagan. My favorite president of the 20th century. And it's amazing how the issues of the 1980 election are very similar to what they are today. I don't know if those of you who are of a certain age here probably remember the inflation that was going on back then. 20% interest on a bank loan. We had Iran hostages. We were a nation in decline. That's what they told us. Ronald Reagan came along and said, no, we're not a nation in decline. We're going there. And we followed him. The same with Trump, with President Trump, my favorite president of the 21st century. So, I voted for Reagan, went into the voting booth, and I was glad to do it. It was my second time voting. I think I got it right this time. And I went and I voted for him. I went home. I was living in L.A. I had a roommate. He said, who'd you vote for? I said, Reagan. He said, you were kicked out of the hippies. So I turned in my card right then and there. But, I'm going to ask you a question that Reagan asked America back then. And I think it's the question that got him elected. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? 4 years ago, under President Trump, we had energy. We were an energy independent nation. We had cheap gas. We were actually exporting oil to our allies and our friends. Today, Putin is making money hand over fist, selling oil that he uses to pay for his Soviet-style comeback war that he has with Ukraine. And while we're shutting down our pipelines over here and capping our wells and begging Saudi Arabia and Venezuela to will you please sell us some oil? We're kind of short right now. Today, and what about inflation? What about it? When he left office, inflation was under 2%. That's like nothing. It was free money almost. Today, all you got to do is go to the grocery store, go to the gas station, go to the department store. There's evidence enough right there that we know that fairy tale called Harris Bidenomics just doesn't work. 4 years ago, peace in the world was not just some kind of fairy tale either. Peace in the Middle East, Trump actually was right on the verge of accomplishing the Abraham Accords that would have recognized Israel by Saudi Arabia and other Middle East nations and would have had us on the road to peace that we have been so trying to get to since the biblical times of Ishmael and Isaac.
That's actor Dennis Quaid, star of the Reagan movie, opening the Trump rally in California.
And I'm hereby calling for the death penalty for any migrant that kills an American citizen or law enforcement officer. Death penalty. It's time. Kamala's mass migrants, she started this by letting people come in. No proof, no anything. They didn't need anything. There was no vetting. Just come on in. Where were you? Who are you? Don't worry, it doesn't matter. Murders were coming in. Remember CNN? They had this young reporter, a young, beautiful young reporter, talking to somebody. Where do you come from? I come from Colombia. Oh, were you in jail? Yes, I was in prison. What did you do? Murder. That was the end of CNN for the night. They were not happy with it. When that happened, the cameras sort of shut off, immediately shut up.
Donald Trump going big on immigration and illegal aliens at his rally in California. As I mentioned, tomorrow marks 3 weeks until Election Day. This is Newsmax host Tom Basile on America Right Now.
Welcome back to America Right Now. I'm Tom Basile. Well, the great American voter purge is happening, and it's a good thing. Well, it appears to be happening in certain places where they appear to care more than others about securing our elections. It is at once a sign that there are those in government willing to address the threat to the integrity of our democratic process, and also an exposition of the willful degrading of our system by the Democratic Party. Part of the industrial-level gaslighting that has come to define the messages that we see in the news and on social media and from the so-called expert class has attempted for years to tell Americans that our voter rolls are just fine. They are not riddled with dead people, duplicate registrations, inactive voters, voters who moved to other states, and, of course, non-citizens. This alleged fantasy was cooked up in the mind of Donald Trump and so-called MAGA Republicans, according to the left, but it is, in fact, an indisputable truth intentionally ignored by Democrats. Back in August, Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced that 1.15 million people had been taken off the Lone Star State's voter rolls since 2021. 1.15 million. Of those, 40% were deceased. Nearly 20,000 canceled their own voter registrations. 6,000 can no longer vote due to a felony conviction. And another 6,500 were non-citizens. Yes, that's right, non-citizens. Another 463,000 were removed because the local county officials couldn't even verify they lived at the address that was connected with the registration. Oklahoma's Republican Governor Kevin Stitt, they reported that since 2021, nearly 500,000 ineligible voters have been purged from the state's rolls. Of the 453,000 removed, 97,000 were dead. 5,600 were felons, 15,000 were duplicate registrations, and 195,000 couldn't verify their address. 144,000 had just moved out of state. And those numbers are astronomical, considering that Oklahoma only has a population of about 3.7 million people. In Virginia, their Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin's administration removed more than 6,000 non-citizens from the voter rolls. Youngkin also signed new executive orders in August that would require paper ballots, offline tabulation machines, and daily voter roll maintenance. Democrats filed a federal lawsuit against the state this week to challenge those changes, and yesterday the Justice Department announced they're going to try to stop him from doing it as well. Alabama and their Republican leadership also found thousands of non-citizens on its rolls. The Biden-Harris Justice Department is suing that state as well to prevent them from stripping those illegal voters from the rolls. Republicans in more than a dozen states, including Georgia and Florida and the ones I mentioned and others, have been advancing election integrity reforms over the last 3 years. They're taking the necessary action to ensure greater election integrity, though without paper ballots and voter ID and analog voting systems, it may still fall short, but at least they're trying. Democrat-run states are a different matter entirely. In Vice Presidential nominee Governor Tim Walz's Minnesota, where he signed the automatic voter registration into law as part of his driver's licenses for all bill that includes illegal immigrants, 65,000 new voters have signed the rolls. The Secretary of State there, however, has been accused of slow-rolling efforts to remove voters who failed to provide appropriate citizenship documentation. California just banned voter identification entirely. They banned it. Most other Democrats are just merely driving a message that racist Republicans want to disenfranchise voters, or they'll just make up any nonsensical excuse.
Tom Basile is the host of America Right Now, Saturday mornings at 9 Eastern, followed by Saturday Agenda with Rita Cosby, who spoke with Trump 2024 Communications Director Tim Murtaugh.
How do you think when you see all of this, they're trying to get her out there, but it seems that this strategy is not working? Your thoughts on how is she going to fare as this continues, because a lot of times she has been it's sort of open mouth, insert foot. Even the comments where she said just recently on The View, Tim, and if I were you guys, I'd play this all day long. Well, I can't really think of anything different in terms of Biden's policies than my policies. That blew her whole campaign up.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, that's the soundbite. Every time she does any of these media interviews, she gives us just the biggest nugget of gold that anyone could ever possibly want in politics. That thing on The View where she was asked directly, what would you have done differently, anything in the last 4 years different from Joe Biden? And she said, nothing comes to mind. And in fact, I've been right there with him making all the decisions, every important step along the way. We couldn't ask for anything better. We're playing that clip at rallies, and I don't want to give away our advertising strategy, but I bet you might see that clip coming to an ad on a screen near you. And she's terrible. It's a campaign reboot is what they're doing. First, their strategy was to keep her away and Tim Walz, keep them away from any cameras or any open microphones. And they saw that wasn't working. So she had to go out and start doing interview after interview after interview. And it has been a disaster. This is just what happened to her in 2019. She came on the scene as a candidate when she ran for president the first time back in 2019. There was a little buzz around her. People thought, hey, this is somebody who can make waves. And then as soon as the public got a load of her act, they thought, this lady is not ready to be president, and off the stage she went. That's exactly what we're seeing happen now. It's being reflected in the public polls, in the battleground state polls, in the national polling numbers, all of it. Every number is trending toward Donald Trump. He has, in our own internal numbers, which we just released, Donald Trump has a lead in all 7 battleground states, including the key battleground state that everyone agrees on is Pennsylvania, a lead there as well. We're liking the trend. We hope she continues to go out and do more media every single day, we hope. Also, Tim Walz. He is also a great soundbite factory for us.
Trump 2024 Communications Director Tim Murtaugh on Saturday agenda. Perhaps the highlight of the entire weekend, which you will likely hear more about today on Newsmax, is J.D. Vance's appearance on ABC this week with Martha Raddatz.
Actually in Aurora, Colorado, talking to people on the ground. And what we're hearing, of course, Martha, is that people are terrified by what has happened with some of these Venezuelan gangs.
Senator Vance, I'm going to stop you because I know exactly what happened. Martha. I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border. Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. I worry so much more about that problem than anything else here. We've got to get American communities in a safe space again. And unfortunately, when you let people in by the millions, most of whom are unvetted, most of whom you don't know who they really are, you're going to have problems like this. Kamala Harris, 94 executive orders that undid Donald Trump's successful border policies. We knew this stuff would happen. They bragged about opening the border, and now we have the consequences, and we're living with it. We can do so much better, but frankly, we're not going to do better, Martha, unless Donald Trump calls this stuff out. I'm glad that he did.
Okay, let's just end that with they did not invade or take over the city, as Donald Trump said. I want to move on to
just a few apartment complexes. No big deal.
Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance bringing the goods again, this time on ABC this week. By the way, he was probably very upset that Ohio State lost to Oregon on Saturday. Vance also made a stop at NASCAR's Roval 400 at beautiful Charlotte Motor Speedway yesterday. It was a busy day for him. He will hold a rally in Williamsport, Pennsylvania on Wednesday. Donald Trump is in Oaks, PA today, as I mentioned, and Vice President Harris with an event in Erie, Pennsylvania. You see the trend there? Speaking of trends, there wasn't one this morning on Wall Street. Stock markets kicking off the start of a big week with a mixed open. The S&P and the NASDAQ were up. The Dow was in the red. We have retail sales reports due out later this week, which could weigh further on interest rate cuts. And earnings season gets underway with some of the nation's largest banks like Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley reporting earnings over the next few days, as well as Netflix. If you own any of those stocks, you have been warned because things could get volatile. Monday Night Football features the Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets, who fired their coach last week. And after yesterday, the Dallas Cowboys absolutely have to let Mike McCarthy go. What a complete embarrassment. Holy smokes. Be sure to keep up with all the news on Newsmax, newsmax.com, and make sure you're streaming on Newsmax Plus for the most complete lineup of all of your favorite shows, hosts, and guests. Newsmaxplus.com. Get signed up if you're not already signed up. Greg Kelly reports. Rob Schmidt tonight, The Record with Greta Van Susteren. Carl Higbee on Frontline. Finnerty at 8 Eastern. Wake Up America, and much more. Expert analysis from Mark Halpern, Governor Mike Huckabee, Hogan Gidley, Judge Napolitano, and many, many others. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you, as always, for stopping by the NEWSMAX Daily. Do appreciate that. Make sure you subscribe on whatever podcast platform you may be listening to. Enjoy your Columbus Day, regardless of what you may or may not be doing, and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the NEWSMAX app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Hey, it's Jerry Callahan from The Callahan Show. You can listen to us every day. We react to the latest news, politics, sports, and all the madness in the world. I'll give you my opinion with a little edge, a little attitude. I'm an unapologetic right-winger, trapped behind enemy lines in deep blue Boston, so I'm used to taking on the mainstream media mob. You can hear us anywhere you get your podcast, or you can listen every day at newsmax.com/listen.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real.